The lens of history is going to say some really interesting things about 2020. I am very sure of that.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Turn the page, wash your hands.
Yeah, we are in the place to be.
Hi-ho, GB Mythos here, and welcome to the Little Old People Podcast. I'm here with my old person, Mark.
AKA the Little Black Dude. If this is your first time listening, we're two oldish nerds looking at random fandoms from varying directions.
I'm a historian and archaeologist by degree, and a former wage slave by trade. Mark's a jeweler, YouTuber, and fellow fan enthusiast.
The topic this time around is centered around two icons of comic history, Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne, the Man of Steel and the Caped Crusader, Superman and Batman. As a DC Comics enthusiast, I know how rare that is. I love when characters get some recognition, especially in more mainstream avenues. I think we can all agree, though, there's only a few characters from DC that garner respect from the general public, Superman and Batman, although I will always carry a torch for Green Lantern. It appears that Batman is currently everyone's favorite hero. However, this wasn't always the case. Before the 70s version of the Justice League and the Super Friends cartoons, there was a strong following for the Man of Steel, Superman. His appeal seemed nearly universal from his inception in the late 30s until about the mid-70s. Though I don't really think that it's as simple as this, I have to agree there's an obvious disagreement between the generations concerning which of DC's big guns is the more impressive. We'll be discussing influences of each character, and why it appears there's a wedge driven between the generations on who's better. Choose your side, Captain Sama.
Well, I, as a lazy millennial, trademark, will be coming down on the side of the Dark Knight. When Bill Finger and Bob Kane first introduced Batman in the DC Comics number 27 in 1939, Superman was already a force to be reckoned with in the world of comics. But I believe readers were looking for something more than Superman's black and white hero versus villain look at the world, as America and Europe began garnering up to enter World War II. Batman offered nuance, and Superman did not. When he was first introduced, Batman carried a gun because he had no superpowers besides his money, and would straight up kill street thugs that he was fighting. As time went on, he lost the gun, and the writers decided that Batman would be a no-kill hero, which was great for the kids reading, but not so great for the, paraplegic thugs that he clearly leaves littering the streets of Gotham. But why do I like Batman? The constant brooding and anxiety over the death of his parents and the potential corruption of his many, many Robins, the way he lurks on rooftops of buildings, the fact that he fights alone with like 5 other people. No, let's be real. When it comes to Batman, the rule of cool always applies. He cheats. He's the smartest person in the room. Superman is afraid of him. The 1990s animated series won multiple Emmys, the first to be awarded on a daytime children's cartoon for the episode Heart of Ice, which introduced Mr. Freeze as a truly sympathetic antagonist. And it also won the Outstanding Writing in an Animated Program, which it fully deserved.
Well deserved. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's definitely made Mr. Freeze one of my favorite characters. And as much as I love Arnold, Batman and Robin was a disappointment. Now, going back to actually good shows, this is a children's TV show, but it didn't talk down to its viewers, and that is truly where my love of this character originated. We got Mark Hamill's brilliant and iconic Joker, as well as some of the best villains in the comic world. No one can argue that Batman's Rogues Gallery is the best.
Absolutely.
We've got the Penguin, Scarecrow, Mr. Freeze, Ra's al Ghul, Clayface, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, the Ventriloquist, Catwoman, the Doll Maker, Baby Doll, Solomon Grundy, the Riddler, even Bane. And that's just the short list. This is just the A list. And I'm not even talking about the C-list villains or, the people we only see once. That's just his A-list, Rogues Gallery. It's fantastic. The other thing was that we, as 90s kids, were graced with what was, which, in 1989 was the live action film with Michael Keaton. And it was, frankly, the best Batman, and it definitely brought Batman forward into the public consciousness. Sadly, we then had to wait another 20 years for another decent Batman film with Christian Bale and the late, great Heath Ledger, Morgan Freeman, and Michael Caine. Now, as an adult, when we're forced into these social boxes and made to move through life with our own masks, Batman has always dared to say, Bruce Wayne is the mask. I am Batman. Batman can be camp. See the late, great Adam West. But the fact that he lives in a moral gray area allows for a much more nuanced portrayal from his writers and from the readers. You are forced to look at your own morals and beliefs and question everything.
Well, I can accept what you are saying, but truth, justice, and the little black dude's way then. Point the the first. Superman represents ideals. Now, during the pre-World War II era, Americans were kind of in the habit of seeking out moral compasses. Morality was a subject that was often aimed at children as well, because you wanted to, have your children grow up to be upstanding human beings.
Mhm.
Now, what this means, of course, has changed over the course of time, but generally, being honest, doing the right thing, treating people with respect, helping out wherever you can. And using fantasy characters to guide young minds was very commonplace. It still kind of is, although it is handled differently now. Instead of having, the hero that, gives the knockout punch to the villain, now we have characters that are, teaching an idea and following a specific, set of rules in order to, teach kids to understand that there is a proper path to follow, instead of just saying this is blatantly right, this is blatantly wrong, which is another thing that Batman does quite well. However, during this period of time, stories that were of that fashion sold books. It didn't matter what genre it was, but that hero versus villain, that protagonist versus antagonist feeling just sold books. That was something that worked. It was something that moved stuff off the shelves. So, of course, it was an easy decision to make for Simon & Schuster at the time.
Sure.
And because of that, it's a simple to understand concept, and it catches readers' interest a lot more easily when it's something that's simple. One of the things that my mother, who was a teacher, always said is, if you're teaching someone new, try to explain it like they're the youngest person in the room. Everybody will be able to get it. So it's a simple thing. And plain and simple, telling the truth, standing up for the little guy, and fighting for America was the mindset of the pre-World War II era. And that still kind of is something that fits well even in the modern day. But again, things are a lot different. The lens of history is going to say some really interesting things about 2020. I am very sure of that. Point the second. Superman defined the quote-unquote superhero for decades.
Sure.
The most ambitious of stances was taken when DC Comics took the idea and said that Superman represented what a superhero is. And during the 70s, both DC Comics and Marvel were, vying for the rights to the actual term superhero. And it was a pretty interesting legal battle. Also, not the only legal battle that those two had. But when you ask the average person, what's a superhero? One of the first names was always Superman.
Yes, that's true. But let's talk about the 1970s for a moment. There was a cultural sea change in the 70s that really started in the 60s with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. Vietnam was kicking into full swing, and there were the protests against it. The hippie movement, the Black Power movement, and terrorism were becoming household words. And a new generation was being born. And here there was a split. Some really wanted Superman's black and white view of the world, and others saw him as far too simplistic, a pedantic relic of a falsely rose-colored bygone era. So I'm not surprised that his popularity went down and that Batman's rose, turning into the grizzled, grimdark anti-hero that we know from Frank Miller's 1986, the Dark Knight Returns, or even Christian Bale's portrayal of him, in the movies in the early 2010s. He was grimdark. You would never have seen Adam West slamming somebody up against a wall saying, "Swear to me." It just wouldn't happen.
Did, no one would take it seriously either. We
exactly.
I cannot deny that Dark Knight Returns was probably one of the best stories that Frank Miller ever freaking wrote. So I give nothing but respect there. Give credit where credit is due has always been something I aspired to. But a lot of the reason that I stick more towards Superman is because many of the adages that we use to talk about transcending normalcy refer to the look and feel of Superman. Like, for example, not all heroes wear capes. I enjoy the fact that we can look at something and say, okay, this is the bar. Let's try and raise it a little bit. Let's be more than just man. Let's try and be Superman. Although all through the 80s, improvements on things definitely got the super prefix, and it got used until, unfortunately, it kind of lost meaning. And that was when we started using extreme and ultra and all that kind of stuff. But again,
you did say it right. It's extreme! There's no E in that word. It's just X.
That's true. These were some of the things that governed the way that I understood things at the period of time. Which brings me to point the third. One of the reasons that a lot of people had boredom with Superman is because he could literally do anything.
Yeah.
When the early stories were being written, that was literally it. Whatever power he needed to have at the time, he had. But around 1987, which was part of the storyline called Crisis on Infinite Earths, where all of the stories from DC were kind of slammed and jammed into each other into a single universe with a single continuity, where every story that was being told was a continuous thing. That was when they standardized what Superman's powers were, and it's really an interesting thing to see how that changed him, because when he had the whole Deus Ex Machina thing going on, where he could just do whatever he wanted, be whatever he wanted, yeah, it can be boring. But giving him a specific skill set definitely made a difference in the way that he was perceived, because there were only so many ways he could solve a problem. And giving him the capability of doing so really did make a difference. Now, because of his willingness to solve problems and his capability to do so, that's one of the things that I've always looked up to as far as the way Superman handles things. And because of that, go get him, concept, this looks like a job for Superman. Unfortunately, there are some people that don't like this, but every job is a job for Superman because he's had the ability to do so. Being able to change the way things are definitely makes a difference. And that's something that we tend to aspire to, being able to make a difference.
And yet, like I said, this is also the time of Frank Miller's Batman, where, we get the grim, dark, the more broody, the early comic readers who allowed comics to become more accessible and acceptable in the 60s and 70s are now moving into their 30s and 40s. We were just coming up, but, these people were living through the Cold War era. This was the duck and cover generation. Superman just wasn't going to cover it anymore. And that was not the way that they were feeling anymore. The Cold War was ending, the Berlin Wall was coming down. Russia was finally opening up. The Eastern Bloc was falling apart. Bosnia and Chechnya and all the wars in that era started blowing up. The world was a dark place. And that is where Batman fit into that slot, because he wasn't looking to change the world. He knew Gotham was kind of a shithole, and he just went with it. And he does what he can, but he doesn't expect to be doing everything. You call Superman to get a cat out of a tree. You do not call Batman to get a cat out of a tree.
That's true.
Yes, Superman will stop somebody. Batman will stop somebody, rather, if he sees you, getting your purse stolen. But he's more interested in the drug deal down by the docks. Where do I want him? I'd like to get my purse back, but I'd rather have him dealing with the drug dealers down on the docks. And that's kind of where they started moving in that direction, because that's where people's mindsets were. The innocence of Superman, it was too cutesy. Even his colors have a certain cutesiness to them, with the bright yellow and the red and the blue. It's all very bright and sunny and very friendly. But at the same time, as much as I love the darkness of Batman, but he will still sit down on a swing with a child and take off his hood and say, hey, I'm a real guy underneath here. Those are also we're still getting both sides of that. But it just felt more real with Batman.
Which is why I think that the period of time where my next point comes from is so significant, but it also is another thing that makes the divide so much clearer. Point the fourth is that Superman's first real turning point when it came to the kind of character he is, his popularity started to change with Death of Superman. Death of Superman in 1991, 1992, probably one of the most interesting storylines that involved him. And it was a universe-changing story because the one character that no one believed could die was about to die.
I mean, I can still see the comic cover in my mind, just with the torn cape attached to that pole, just blowing in the wind. That was the cover of that comic. I can still see that in my head.
Yeah, I think about the black bag with the bloody shield on it too.
Oh,
so of course that's still an iconic thing. Now the hype train because of that was essentially the Orient Express. And it made diehard DC readers cling to it. The casual readers were like, is Superman not gonna, be a thing anymore? Let me find out about that. Like people who, read comics from time to time, they saw this and they were jumping on it. They wanted to see what's going on. The value of the character, as well as the value of the property, as the, value that came to the company, really took a dive though because of people hoarding the black and white bagged Death and Rebirth comics. Everyone that I knew that bought a copy of this comic didn't just buy a copy of this comic. They bought at least two. One to read, the other to hold on to because it was going to be worth so much money.
Turn the page,
Mm.
wash your hands.
What many people were really believing to be some of the most valuable comics since the first Action Comics in 1938 ended up being the lefty MacGuffin of the 90s. Everybody had one.
Yeah.
The problem was the way that the story was written, though, is it was a near literal Deus Ex Machina.
Mhm.
You know, having Superman coming back to life did kind of cheapen the entire story. However, it was well written and well illustrated. And it's one of the things that I enjoyed about that period of time. The art style was fairly uniform throughout the DC universe at that time. So
Yeah.
you had a decent amount of quality that was going on. And it really started taking hold during Death and Rebirth. But parts of that are kind of stilted, and there were, you know, some roadblocks here and there because of the feeling that it was like some of the Greek dramas, which oftentimes fits because, in all honesty, these are the mythological, you know, characters, you know, of the modern era. You know, instead of us, you know, following after Achilles and Athena and Hera, we're following after, you know, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. You know, these are the characters that we aspire to and love now. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed Superman Death and Rebirth as much as I did. Problem is, most people forgot that there was an entire storyline going on. Death of Superman was only the beginning of it. Then there was World Without a Superman, and then Rebirth of Superman. Excuse me, Return of Superman. Sorry. And the entirety of that changed the entire world of the whole thing. Superman is such an important character to the DC universe that no matter what happens to him, it does something to the rest of the universe. People look at the way that the DC universe is differently when something shifts. And then finally, Superman has a lot more redeeming qualities in his current form, because even though it took a long time to get to this point of the race, people realize that the Boy Scout right over wrong worldview, even though it still exists in some form in Superman, over maybe the last 15, 20 years, gave us more of an interesting angle. Because instead of just, I'm going to solve the problem, the idea of how does somebody who has the right over wrong worldview exist in modern times?
Exactly.
As you were saying before about Batman, he does have kind of an anachronism feel go on. You know, we were discussing this earlier on.
Yeah.
Superman kind of has the same thing going on, but because of the way he's written, they do have two different feelings. A perfect example of this is the story for Kingdom Come, which is a thought-provoking story, because Superman retreats from the world when there is a nuclear disaster in Kansas, completely destroys the state of Kansas. And because of him not being able to do anything about it, he kind of just re-examines everything he's doing, completely retreats from the world, and just tries to make things better from a place where he's far enough away that his presence can't do damage. This is all in his own mind. It doesn't go well, though, because without him, the new age of heroes who, instead of trying to solve problems and save people, were more about accolades. It was more about turf wars. It was more about who's the better hero. And it kind of felt like the universe had lost kind of a direction. It didn't go well. It really did not go well, but it makes you think so much, because this is also where Superman had to make a choice between trying to make things right and trying to keep people from causing more harm. And it kind of doesn't go the way you expect.
But you know, the only way I would expect that to go would be badly, because that's one of those situations where you have to, I like people, but you can't always expect them to behave the best. And Batman always assumes the worst until proven otherwise. And Superman always assumes the best, even when proven otherwise. And that's not healthy.
It is not healthy. I can agree with that. And it does make a difference in this particular story as well. But DC rewriting their universe is something that they just tend to do every 10, 15 years or so. Back in 2005, Infinite Crisis. I can agree with that. Although I love the way DC portrays some of their characters, and this particular set of stories about Superman really did make a difference. It cast him in a different light, rather. What happens if Superman decides that the world's not worth saving is an underlying theme during Infinite Crisis. Like, what happens if he deems himself superior and uses his power to destroy the Earth instead of saving?
Mhm.
And the questions of his morality and the limits of his thought process also show up in the Injustice games. And I
Mhm.
don't care what anyone says. Superman in Injustice is fucking awesome. I cannot be mad about how he is done in Injustice because the character itself, it has a flavor, it has a spice to it. You know he's crazy as all hell. You know he's in the wrong for how he's doing things, but it's just so interesting to play. So interesting.
Because he actually has character.
But you do get a lot of that also in Man of Steel, as bad as Man of Steel was.
You can't hear me, listeners, but my eyeballs have already rolled down the street.
Yeah, it's not pretty. Trust me, you don't want to see it. The thing that killed me, though, was the Christ imagery in that movie, and that in and of itself is a complete other podcast. I don't think we'll ever touch on it, but I'm sure somebody has already.
I'm sure they have. I mean, that is... Oof.
But we delve into the dimensions of a character that oftentimes people say, well, just because he's a hero, he doesn't need to have any dimensions. And that's not true. That's absolutely not true. Now, it's hard to do sometimes because, the way he's been written for such a long time, no one really sat and thought about, well, what happens if he does this? What happens if he does that? What happens if this is this experience? And it does make it hard to understand when somebody actually does ask that question.
Yeah.
And even though most people view Batman as the ideal hero for this day and age, there's many people who do that without seeing the differences in Superman's self-image from the mid-90s to now. One particular scene that always jumps to mind whenever I think about Superman's personality is from Green Lantern: Power of Ion.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent storyline. If you ever get the chance to read, please do so. It is amazing. But Superman and Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, who at the time had absorbed all of the power that was left behind by Hal Jordan when he sacrificed himself to restart the sun, and basically turned him into a god. The two of them are discussing the differences between sentient beings being protected versus being kept, not only pets. Superman, who's always seen as the one who does everything for everyone, cautions Kyle that the course of action he was taking, which was basically doing everything that he possibly could within the universe to stop everything, really wasn't the thing he should be doing, because he was stripping people of the ability to do what they could to protect themselves and alter their own fates. And my understanding of this is having the power to do something is less important than knowing what to do with that power and when. And in my opinion, that's a statement that even Bruce Wayne can co-sign on.
And no, I'm not going to disagree with you, and that is true. However, if you look at Superman in, Superman Red Son, you see that, you get a Superman who was raised in Russia under the Iron Curtain, or, even as you mentioned, the Injustice series, and you get a Superman for all his protestations about, restraint and responsibility. And you can see how easily he can be pushed into the role of the ultimate dictator because he thinks he's doing the right thing or he's helping to improve people. If you sell it to him softly, he'll do anything you want. That was one of the things that made Red Son so compelling, is because, he goes to talk to Joseph Stalin and he's like, oh yes, I have to give my powers to the state, but I'm helping people, and oh no, what you're doing is very, very wrong. But as soon as Stalin dies, essentially Superman becomes Stalin, and he's like, oh, I'm not doing those things. And it's like, yeah, you totally are. But I look at Batman and I say, I'm seeing, Batman knows his limit, and he will be the first one to tell you, I can't do everything, but it won't stop him from attempting to do everything. And I will admit, there are many times that he does cross the line. He crosses from that moral gray area into full black. There's no time when Batman stops and says, oh yeah, I'm not going to do anything because, that's the right thing to do. That's just not him. He's a man of action. But I will admit, there are many times he crosses the line. And you even see it in the Dark Knight movies when he uses all the cell phone towers to make radar so he can start spying on people. That crosses the line. And Lucius Fox tells him that. He's like, I will not continue to work for you if you continue to do this, because this is just wrong. Except I don't sound like Morgan Freeman, but yeah.
No one sounds like Morgan Freeman but Morgan Freeman.
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman.
And yet we've never had a comic where you'll see Batman falling into tyranny the way that Superman does. and Superman goes so easily. And it's not that difficult. All you have to do is give him a slight nudge in any one direction, and just instantly tyranny. And because there's nobody there to balance him. And I feel like Batman has that balance. He's gained it quietly over the years with the acquisition of his air quotes Bat family. Because you got Nightwing and Alfred and Oracle and all the various Robins, except Damian, fuck him, who will take Batman to the carpet.
That kid.
And will take Batman to the carpet and say, no, man, you're doing it too brown. You need to stop. And they will do whatever they can to stop him and to give him that other perspective. And Superman just doesn't have that. He just does whatever. And, when he gets frustrated, the first thing he does is either go home and whine to his mother or go to the Fortress of Solitude and pout. Batman pouts too, but he does it on top of buildings while he's patrolling the city. He multitasks. But I think...
To be fair, when you can move faster than the speed of sound, I don't really think it's that bad for you to, take, a few moments in a place several thousand miles away to be pissed off for a while and then come back. But
he doesn't take a few minutes. He was gone for 5 years in Man of Steel. He was gone for 5 years.
Again, yes, that movie was terrible. Although if you want to talk about being gone, you want to look at Superman Returns and go, God, that movie was worse.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. I won't disagree with that. Gene Hackman was fine, but the rest of it was a little, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
But, yeah. But you never see...
Gene Hackman will always be the villain, plain and simple, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I love that shit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, you don't see Batman just disappear from his responsibilities like that. I mean, they tried to sell us that at the end of, The Dark Knight Returns, and everyone was like, yeah, no, that's not Batman. What are you doing? And I get Christian Bale is sick of playing the character, and I get that. But, trying to sell us that bill of goods where Batman would just disappear from his responsibilities is just not in his character. He doesn't know how to do that. He's still going to keep coming back. And the worse the situation gets, the more he'll just stay there and keep slogging through. Superman will go home and cry to his mother, and she'll tell him, you're a big boy, you can do this, pat, 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 and send him on his way. Batman doesn't do that.
Because he doesn't have his mother. And that is another one of the things that still to this day kills me about Batman versus Superman. Why the crap was that the thing that united these two who were just a few minutes ago trying to kill each other?
Because it's the same thing that happens in the end of the Revenge of the Sith when Darth Vader steps off the platform and goes, no! That's this generation's no. Martha has become this generation's no.
Sadly, yes. I
mean, memes weren't quite a thing yet, but if they were, it would have been a thing. But it was so stupid, everyone was like, I'm not even touching that.
Oh, please. We tried to make that a thing for a long time.
Yeah, we did.
Tried to make that a thing.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just don't find him a nuanced enough character. And you're not the first person I've had this discussion with. I have a boomer for a parent, and I have a Gen Xer as an older sister, and then I'm a millennial. So I've got all the perspectives, and they are definitely very much pro-Superman. And my brother and I may disagree on many, many things, but we are both very pro-Batman. It's just kind of one of those things. I'm not saying I hate Superman. I'm just saying he's not a nuanced enough character for me to appreciate him.
Now, see, I'm on the exact opposite spectrum. I have always liked Batman as a character because he has capabilities that the average person doesn't have, but can aspire to. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's also one of the characters that does make a point of brains triumphing over brawn more often than not, which is another thing I hate about modern Batman, because all he does is punch people in the face more often than not, rather than actually solving, any type of mysteries. Any type of crimes that need some type of thought, it seems like those are ignored.
That's true.
But he was always considered the world's greatest detective. And honestly, anybody that he gave props to as a detective, people started like, okay, so Batman thinks you're good? You must be pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I still think that Batman's a good character, very much so. But most of the people that I've met that are huge fans of Batman aren't fans of Batman because of his character. They are fans of Batman because of the hype, and it kills me. You and I are talking intelligently about the whole thing, You have reasons that you understand that I can understand as well, that you see Batman as being a more interesting character, more nuanced character. Myself, because my head is a lot more black and white, it's easier for me to just separate the concept. I can relate more to Superman's ideas and ideals, but I enjoy the fact that even though he's still stiff, I'm not gonna lie to you, he's 100% a stiff character, you start to see how he's beginning to develop and bend. The problems that he has are fundamentally different from some of the other characters in the DC universe, but he still is grappling between humanity and godhood on a regular basis. And the humanizing aspect of deciding to lean more towards the humble beginnings that he had and just, down home morality versus I can do whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want, oftentimes is what I look at and enjoy because I can understand it. It's a simple concept. Do what's right. Try and take care of as many people as you can. Yes, it does get old. It's the same cycle over and over again. I get that. But if we took care of each other and did what's right more often, the world wouldn't really need a character like Batman.
That's true. And the way I see it is because people don't, we still need Batman. He will always be riding that moral gray area because we know that people are not like that. As much as we would love them to be that very black and white, after we reach a very young, a certain age, but also at a very young age, we move into a more gray area. And Batman rides that line. And I guess that realism for me makes him much more easy to relate to, because I can see where he's making the decisions to, do I break this guy's back? Do I leave him lying in a puddle of, his own, everything, and walk away? How extreme do I need to be in this situation? Do I just leave the guy dangling out of a tree and hope the police come and get him? What are my options here? And then he just goes for it. You don't see Superman and his techniques being copied in other games. Everything has now started coming back to the Batman singularity. And yeah, that's a little annoying, but you don't see the characters going, oh yes, I definitely have to fit one moral, has to be exactly good or exactly evil. You don't see that, but everything does seem to come back to the Batman singularity, hookshot included.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting tired and we need to move on from that, but I understand why it happens, because that's more realistic. And maybe right now what we need in this wonderful post 9/11 world that we're living in is that grimdark reality.
I will agree. I definitely will agree. Having a reality to the fantasies that we have isn't a bad thing. It really isn't. But part of the reason why I like fantasy is because it's not the same as reality. It's always nice to know that there is still a place where the thought that things can turn out okay still fits somewhere. But it's one of those things. And there's nothing really wrong with that.
There's plenty of fantasy in Batman. He has the power of infinite money. There's still plenty of fantasy there. But I think overall, you and I can both agree, no capes. Where can people find us if they want to hear more from us?
Well, you can always find us on our link tree, which is linktr.ee/Little Old People Podcast. You can find all of our social media as well as our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to find, where our podcast is on a number of services like Google Podcast, on Sounder, as well as, are we still doing Stitcher?
Yes. You can even vote for us on Stitcher.
Okay, so we are still... Oh, awesome. See, that's another thing that you should do. If you think we're awesome, go ahead and give us a good upvote there. You'll be able to find us also on Facebook, at facebook.com/Little OP Podcast, Twitter at Little OP Podcast. And if you want to send us an email, saying how great or terrible we might be, you can always send us an email at littleoldpeoplepodcast@gmail.com.
I've been Chibi Mythos. He's been the little black dude, and we'll see you on our next episode.
Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Okay, record. Counting down 15.
Okay.
Can't see the timer. It's kicking me in the butt, but that's okay. Where the hell's my timer? You fucking bastard, where's my timer? It is sad when you have to cuss out technology.
If this is your first time listening, We're two oldish nerds. That is green. That's your text.
That's what I get for swallowing. Good Lord. As a DK, yeah,
This is what happens when you go 2 months without recording. There's so many outtakes.